Good afternoon and welcome to the Future City Competition SimCity webinar. We're going to begin here in just a moment. The seminar will be taped and recorded, so you will be able to also see it in the future. We'll put a link up on our website. Some housekeeping. The webinar is using voice over internet. If your sound quality is not very good, you can always use the teleconference number, and the phone number is there. You can also click on the telephone button on the menu of the GoToWebinar, and that information is there. The phone number is 1-702-489-0007, and the code is 291-263-091. After you log in and join the webinar, you will get a PIN number also that you'll need to put in. Again, the recorded webinar and slides will be posted on futurecity.org. Also, we'll be having a survey following the webinar. We ask you to please respond. Gives us a better idea of how better to serve you. My name is Bill Knight, and I'm the National Program Manager for Future City. We're glad you're with us this afternoon. Questions, and we're already getting a few questions, and I'll be answering them as we go along as I can, and then Stone will be answering them at the end of the webinar. All your microphones are muted for webinar quality. Type your questions in the question space in the webinar control panel. Then we'll do a Q&A at the end of the presentation and get to as many of your questions as we can. I'd like to introduce our speaker for today, Stone Lebrande, who is the lead designer for SimCity Electronic Arts. Stone was at our national finals last year, where they demoed the game for the students who were able to attend, and I'm not sure who had more fun, he or the students, but it's a pleasure to share with Stone today and let him take you through the SimCity game. So if you'll give me just a second here while I change screens and let Stone take over for me. Welcome, Stone, and thank you for being with us today.
Okay. All right. You can see my screen okay?
Yes.
Okay. Great. All right. Thank you, everybody, for attending. And for those of you that I did get to meet in Washington, D.C. earlier this year, welcome back again. And hopefully you guys have now all had a chance to play the game some. For those who are just meeting me for the first time, I'm the lead designer of the game. We started working on it about 4 years ago, and we're glad that it's finally in your hands, and we look forward to seeing all the great cities you guys make with the software. So the game is pretty epic in scope. There's a lot of different things that you can do. Today, what I really want to concentrate on is just mostly the transportation systems. So one of the things that's different about this SimCity compared to previous SimCities is that all the cars and people, they really matter to the simulation. They have to get from one place to the next, otherwise your city will start to shut down. This is very much like real-world cities. I happen to... Oh, yes?
This is Thea. I cannot see your screen, nor can some other folks. So can we take a moment and make sure that you are sharing your screen with folks?
Okay. You can see if our screen is up. So, Bill, you're seeing it?
I had it. Now I don't. So if you can click on Show My Screen.
Okay.
There, now we've got it.
Okay, great.
There. Okay. Thank you. Thanks, everyone, for your patience. Sorry about that technical difficulty.
Okay. So as mentioned, the traffic is really important, and where I live out in the Bay Area near San Francisco, for instance, we just had a big light rail strike that just ended this morning, and little things like that can really cause problems in real cities. So part of this SimCity is to keep your traffic flowing, to keep things moving effectively, and if you don't do that, you'll find your city starts to collapse pretty quickly. So this is the thing that I really want to focus most on today. For about the next 20 minutes to half hour, I'll just be showing you some tricks that we've learned here in the studio. So first of all, it's really handy if you can learn some of the keyboard shortcuts. So, for instance, if you hold down the Shift key and hit R, that will immediately
Muted.
the roads. If you hold down the Shift key and press T, that will immediately take you to the different types of transportation options that you have. And another handy key to learn is the B key for bulldoze. So once you get good at using the keyboard commands, and there's a whole bunch of them, you can look in the manual. They're all listed there. Then you really can start to move around the software a lot easier and do things quicker. So let's go into roads. I'll hit Shift R just to pop into the roads. And most of you, if you've been playing with the software, you've probably seen some of these features already. But down over next to the guy with the hard hat, there's different types of roads you can draw. And you'll notice the letter next to each of those. I don't know if you can see it in your screens, but there's a little letter next to each of those which lets you use the keyboard commands also to switch between the different road types, which I find to be very handy. The other thing below that, there's a little checkbox for guides. And you can see when we're going to draw a road. So let me click on a road here. You'll start to see these guides will pop up as you move around. And if those are annoying to you, you don't like them, you can hold down the Alt key, and that will temporarily remove them. Or if you just want to get rid of them permanently, you can just uncheck the box, and that'll just get rid of them. And then Alt will turn them on again, and it'll do the opposite effect. So either way, some people really like those guides, especially if you're making cities that have a lot of square blocks. And some players, like myself, who like very curvy roads and a lot of snakes and S's and stuff, sometimes the guides might not be as helpful for you. But just wanted to let you know that that option is there, that you can turn them off and on whenever you feel like it. Okay, the last thing that I really recommend doing is going to the options settings. And there's a mode in, if you go to settings, gameplay, there's a mode called planning mode camera. And if you haven't found this one yet, I recommend turning it on. What it will do is it lets you pull your camera back a lot farther so you can see more of your city. So you can zoom really far out when planning mode camera is on, which will help you move around your city and see the bigger patterns of the movements in your city. So, all right, well, let's start working on our city now that we know some of those basics. One of the main features that we just added in a patch about a month ago was the ability to raise and lower the roads. So this actually didn't ship with the base game, but if you have the most recent patch, then what you'll be able to do is lift roads up over top of other roads. So if I zoom down in on some of these roads, you'll see they're going right over top of other roads, and things are going below them. And maybe we could do a little example if I can find some clear area here to try to draw a road and just kind of show you how that works. So I'll go to the road tool, and you just draw your road along somewhere. And you can hit the M key to raise it up, and it will start to go up in the air. And then you can use the N key to lower it down into the ground, and you'll make like a little underground tunnel. If it's red, that means there's not enough space to build it. So sometimes you have to go really low or really high or through a mountain to get around different things. But you'll just have to experiment depending on your city. So if we're going to build a road here, as soon as it turns blue, now we're able to build it right over top of these houses. That'll also prevent some of those houses from ever really growing up into skyscrapers. But you know, that's the trade-off that you get of building bridges over top of things like that. Okay. One use for these roads is because traffic is so important to get from one place to another. You can use these bridges a lot to get people to bypass big sections of your city and just get to where they need to go. So here we're looking at all the green is where the people live, and they can get on these overpasses and just drive straight to the commercial districts without having to go through all the side streets along the way. So it's just a quicker way to route people around. Plus, personally, I like it just because it makes the cities look so cool. They have these different levels going under and over each other. But it is a good way to get people right to where they need to go without getting stuck in traffic all the time. The other thing with roads, again, if you've been playing with the software, you probably know this already. But if you're new to the software, it's very important to understand that roads control the density of your city. And what we mean by density in this game is how tall things can get. So for instance, this high density street will let density 1, density 2, and density 3 buildings grow up next to this street. The street next to it, the medium density street, you only get the density 1 and density 2, and then this low density street is only density 1. So a lot of players, they might think that, oh, I should always make density 3 roads because they're the best. But making density 3 roads means you might eventually get giant skyscrapers which have a lot of people in them. And not every city needs every block covered in gigantic skyscrapers. You're just going to have giant traffic problems if you do that. So it's important to consider when you're doing your planning, what areas do I really want to be skyscrapers in the downtown area, and what areas is it okay to be more suburban, smaller houses, smaller stores. And in general, the smaller density that you have, the lower density that you have, the less traffic that you're going to have. So it's a good thing to kind of play that off. What I personally like to do is start out small, and then you can upgrade using this upgrade tool where you can point at a street and then change it from low density to medium, from medium to high, or you can go back down again. And that costs a little bit of money, but that can help set your traffic flow and set the type of buildings that are going to appear. All right. Also, what I try to do usually is you have to connect to the highway that leads outside of your city. And I try to keep that road a high-density road, but in a lot of cases I don't zone right next to it. I try to leave the buildings from growing off of it. I might put a few like bus terminals and fire stations along that main road, but if you don't put a lot of zoning on that road, it will keep traffic from exiting and entering the driveways, and instead all the traffic will have to enter and exit off the side streets, which keeps that main artery, that main flow really clear and fast, keep everybody moving along there. So it's just a good way to kind of keep your city focused of where you want traffic and where you don't want traffic. All right, so that's kind of some of the basics of the road systems, and you can see we have a pretty good flow here. If we go back to the road tool, it will actually show you where your traffic problems are. And right now, this is a very low density city. It hasn't been going for that long. And you can see the little areas of green showing that traffic is very light. But as the game progresses, you'll see that turn to yellow, and eventually you'll see that turn to red. And that's where you know where to concentrate your fixes to the problems that are happening. So one way that I like to fix problems is going with the light rail. And there's a type of road called the light rail avenue. And once you have that down, that's a blue line that you see where it's running along the streets here. The little blue circles are all the different stops where it can stop with the streetcars. So you can see we have a big closed, mostly a closed loop going around, which is a really efficient way of keeping that train where you want it to be, and it goes around in circles and will pick up the most people that way. You can also just make it go back and forth along one street without the loop, and that can work in some cases as well. But personally, I like to do the big loop around the city where I think the most commuters will be. The other trick that a lot of people don't realize is that you can put light rail track down. It doesn't have to be in the middle of a street. You can just put the track and draw it. So here you can see down towards the bottom of the screen, there's that blue line that doesn't have the green next to it. And that's a tunnel that's going down underneath the ground and coming back out again. So it's just going underneath all those industrial buildings as we go. So bury it under the ground, make a little subway out of it, raise it above the roads, but it doesn't have to be on a street. One great thing about that is that pedestrians will walk up and down alongside that track. So it's kind of a way of making a pedestrian only, like cars won't drive on it. And so if we zoom in, you might see, if we're lucky, you might see some pedestrians walking along here, and they're going along that side of the track to get to the station. So this is a really handy way of keeping a lot of car traffic away from your stops, and also will help you get your city, if you want to make a city that's less dependent on car traffic, and you want to make a city that's more about public transportation, you can use just the straight train tracks to make that happen. Now everything has to be connected to a light rail station besides the stops, there has to be a main depot that holds all of those. So where that's placed doesn't really matter too much. You can actually kind of place that out on the outskirts of your city like this one. You tie it into the main one, and this will be where all the streetcars live, and they come from and go to, but people don't need to board it at this place. They'll board it at the little streetcar stops out along the way. And then as you need more cars later on in the game, you just put down a streetcar garage and spend the money for that. And in a moment later, you'll start to see the trains coming out of the station heading towards the stops. So you kind of want to grow your light rail over time. It can be a little expensive to run, but if you start with that in mind right from the very beginning and you plan for it, you can grow it slowly, spend the money slowly as your city starts to grow. It can be very challenging, sometimes almost impossible to decide to put light rail in later after you've already built up all of your city. Might cost a huge amount of money, might take a lot of bulldozing to get it in, but if you plan it early, then that's probably your best bet for that one. Everywhere you have a light rail stop, it's good to think about like the other types of transit that you can have there as well. So that might be a good place to put a bus stop near one of these light rail stops. And so here we're looking at the bus stops, and you can see that some of them are located near the rail stops so that when people get off the rail, they can hop on a bus and go the rest of the way to work. We'll talk about the buses in just a moment. We'll come back to those. Another form of transportation, which is pretty expensive and takes up a lot of room, is the airport. So the airport is not for every city. I think a lot of cities can do just fine without an airport, but for certain types of cities, it's really handy. It's even necessary. So one good thing it's for is that the high wealth people in our game, all the rich people, they will take airplanes, and they won't take a lot of the trains and buses. You can see people don't like airports right next to their houses. That's kind of obvious. So the way we've set up the game is there's 3 wealth classes of people, so what we call Wealth 1, Wealth 2, Wealth 3, and different wealth classes prefer different types of transportation. So this isn't necessarily the way it is in real life, but for game purposes, it makes it easier for us to talk about the different people in the city if they have different needs. So high wealth people might want airplanes and cruise ships, where the low wealth people are happy with the buses and the light rail. So if you're making a city that's about tourism and you're trying to get the most money into your tourism system, then you're going to want all the money that the high wealth people bring in. And so planning a little strip for where an airport might be can be really handy. So here we're just looking at some of the different options, but we could put down an Eiffel Tower, an Empire State Building here if we have some room. I don't think we're going to have room in this city, but we do have room for that. Let's bulldoze these guys here. And putting your tourist attractions right next to your airport means that when these rich people come in, and also the middle wealth will also take airports too, so when your Wealth 2 and Wealth 3 come into the airport, they don't have to tie up the whole traffic to get to where they're trying to go. They can just cross the street and get there really quickly without making a big traffic nightmare. The other thing about airplanes and airports is that you can use them for cargo as well as tourism. And a lot of our systems have this ability to be kind of dual-purposed, where you can say, would we rather concentrate on freight and make more of an industrial town, or would we rather concentrate on people and make more of a tourist town? And that's just something for you to decide based on what you're trying to do with your city. It's sometimes difficult to get both a freight city and a heavy industrial city as well as a tourist city. But we have seen some people around the office, they've been able to kind of get both things working at the same time. Okay, next up, let's take a look at some boats. This is something a lot of players that I've noticed, they don't want to play in cities with water because they think that, oh, that's area that's wasted, that if there's water there, I can't build out there. So I would rather build in a city that's all land so that I don't have all this wasted space. But really, that space, if you put it to good use, can be a huge benefit to your city. And how you do that is this boat dock here. So the ferry terminal will bring in people from other cities can come in to work and to shop, and your people can leave if there's jobs someplace. They can go out and take this ferry as well. Now the nice thing about the ferry dock is that the traffic that comes in and out of here doesn't have to go along the main road, that main entrance to your city. So what you'll find eventually, and this city is still pretty young so you're not seeing this problem yet, is that the highway that leads into your city will get completely gridlocked with traffic, especially if you have a couple people in the region and they're playing and they're sharing things back and forth. So right now you can see up at the top of the screen there's just a few cars coming in and out of the city, not very much. But later on, when the city grows, it can paralyze your city when that road gets jammed. And what the ferry dock does is it gives you kind of a back door into the city. But to make it work, the other people in the region that are also out there, you can kind of see, we haven't built up the cities, but you can kind of see the boat out in the distance, yeah, up in the upper side there. So that boat will travel around and it will go to all the different ferry docks that it can reach and then come back down into your ferry dock and drop people off. So this can really reduce a lot of the traffic if you have people coming in from an alternate entry, like what I call the back door of your city, can make a big difference. Like a lot of the different systems, like the airport, for instance, we can start to tune some of these boats where we can say, do we want them to be for commuters? Do we want them to be for tourists, like with cruise ships? Or do we want them to be for cargo, which is a different type of boat? But for right now, with this ferry dock, we can start to make it more for tourism if we put down the cruise ship dock. And this will make some big yachts will appear. And again, if you're going for a tourist city, you want those. If you're more of an industrial city, you probably want the cargo ships, which are part of the trade system. All right, next up, let's talk some more about the buses. The buses are one of the most common public transportation systems. They're very cheap. They're easy to put down almost anywhere. They don't take a lot of land. You can just stick them down wherever you want. And because of that, what we see is a lot of players, they do what we call spamming bus stops, where they get the bus stop tool and they just start clicking it really fast everywhere. Because the theory is that, hey, if these things are kind of cheap and you can put them wherever you want, let's just start putting them all around because everybody wants a bus stop right in front of their house, right? Well, the problem with doing that is that what you're really doing is you're making the bus stop all the time, and so it takes it a long time to get where it needs to go. And it'll actually make your bus system slower and worse to do that. So it's really important that you think more strategically about where your stops are going to be. In this city, you can see they're about every other block or so going down some main corridors. And they're very organized, and we can understand the bus system pretty clearly. And since a bus will travel from one stop to the next, if they're all in a line, that makes the bus route very predictable, and the bus doesn't have to spend a lot of time making U-turns or going around corners. If you lump a bunch all in one area, the bus can sometimes get kind of confused as it just runs around a short little area trying to service everybody. But if you start to look at these buses that we have right now, you'll see they're very orderly. We kind of know where they're going and what they're doing. And that predictability is going to help us manage our city. Also, we're not wasting a lot of money. Every bus stop does cost a little bit of money, so you don't really want to waste, like it's $10 an hour, which you might think is not a big deal, or 10 simoleons per hour. But when you have 50 or 100 bus stops around your city, and most of them aren't doing any good, that's just a lot of wasted money. The other thing that you can do with buses is, well, these main buses, these local buses are just going to help internally in your city, but you can expand to a bus terminal, and what a bus terminal does is it connects to other cities. So a bus terminal is really good to get traffic flowing between two different cities. Very similar to what I was just talking about with the ferry dock. It's a way of getting people to get out of their cars, and instead of blocking up that road with a lot of individual cars, there's just going to be a few buses carrying a lot of people back and forth. But you got to remember, to get this to work, your friend in the other city has to also put one of these down too. So you've got to work together as a team to make this work. And the same with the ferry dock. If only one city has it, it's not going to do you any good. You're going to have to work together in the region. Okay, and then the last part I'll talk about here, and then we'll be ready for some questions, is the heavy rail system. So heavy rail is a lot like the light rail in that it'll move people around your city, but it goes between the regions just like those regional buses that we had. So no one really owns the train. You own the stations and you own the track, but the train is what we call, it's owned by Maxis, so it's part of the global system, and trains will just come in and out. Not every city has access to train tracks, so that's something you want to look at when you pick your first city, whether or not you'll even be able to put a train through it. So you can kind of think of it as since Maxis is running the train system globally, they haven't put trains everywhere that they need to be, and so you're just kind of at the mercy of where Maxis has laid down the tracks in the region, whether you can tie into it or not. But if you are fortunate enough, or you happen to pay attention enough when you pick your city to get the tracks, there's some really good benefits that you can get from them. So one, just like the ferry terminal, it's a way of getting people in through another route into your city without clogging that main entrance. So depending on where your station is located, you can get people to exactly the point that you want without having to tie up any of your traffic at all. The stops for the train, they're pretty expensive. They can't just stop wherever they want. They're going to have to stop at these train stations. But if you tie them into other systems like the buses and the light rail, then people will get off at this main station and get onto your secondary forms of transportation, moving everything around really easily around the city. You can also use trains for cargo shipping as well, but that's part of the trade system that we're not going to have time to go over today. But tying into that rail system and that ferry system for cargo is really helpful if you're trying to do a city, for instance, that makes television sets or smelts metal. Having those connections is going to be really important. So I think we covered most of the main parts here. I'm sure you have a lot of questions, and I was talking about a lot of things really fast. So we have several minutes here, and I can just get your questions. And I think how it's going to work, Bill, you're just going to tell them to me or read them to me?
Yeah, that's correct. I've already got some here. So let me start with our first one. We got a question, does the new SimCity game work on Chromebooks?
No, it does not. It's for PCs and Macs.
Okay. And another question was, can you make Sims?
No, they'll move in, so you can make houses for them, but it's not like the game The Sims where you can just make up your own sim. But little Sims, we still call them Sims, they still move in, and they're the ones who will move around the city and drive the cars and things.
And they tell you when they're not happy.
Yes, they do. So if we click on a house to look at like the state of the Sims, so this is the Ross residence, so the Rosses live in here. And if we zoom down in on it, sometimes we can even see them, like if they have kids, the kids might be playing in the yard. But what you're seeing along the top there, the land value, that's how much money they have. So they're considered a Wealth One house right now. And then the density, the one below, is going to go up if they're happy. And what the idea here is that the happier people get, the more they want to invite their friends in to live in this city. And so what happens is those small buildings start to get replaced by bigger and bigger buildings if the happiness keeps on going up. But right now everybody's pretty happy. They like this town. There's not a lot of problems in it yet because it's so young.
Great. One of the students wanted to know if you can get rid of bus stops.
Yeah, so if you go to the bulldoze tool.
I'm not on it. It's a webinar. I'm learning. Look at all these notes I'm taking.
Okay, so yeah, so you can hit the bulldoze tool to bulldoze bus stops. So once you have one down, sometimes it's helpful to go to the bus stop layer and see where the bus stops all are, because there'll be those blue circles.
They're like, I have questions.
And then go to the bulldoze tool and just click on it, and we'll remove it. It's just that simple.
Great. Question on how do you connect cities?
Okay, so the question is how do we connect cities together? And for that, what you'll do is you'll go to the region view,
crazy.
And now we're looking at all the different cities in this region, and you can kind of spin around out here. So each one of those squares that you see can be either another player, like you can invite your friends to come in.
I'm sorry, Stone, can we hold on a second? We're getting feedback from someone in the audience. If you could all make sure that your microphones are on mute or your phones are on mute, please.
Okay, let's see how long that lasts. So the different cities that we're seeing right now, the different squares, can be taken over either by a friend, you can have a random person just come in, or you can take them over yourself. So you just click on it, you would say claim, and then you would own that city, or you say invite friends, and then that will send an invite out to your friends to join into that city. But you can kind of see already how they're connected. So if we claim McKinsey Point over here, then we'll zoom down into it, and then we'll have a fresh city. There's a road already built in between the cities that connects them up together. So my job would be in this city now, for instance, I could put down a bus terminal and some houses. And hang on, let me click over some of these messages real quick here. But if we spin the camera around, you can see the other city with the Empire State Building over there, and the connection is formed just by that road. So let's go back to the main city here. But you do that just by going in and out of region view.
Great. I have another question here wanting to know about services. Can you have services such as fire and health buildings spread out across the city, or do you think it's better to have them organized in one area?
Okay. Yeah, so the question's about service vehicles or service stations and where you want to put them all. There's different strategies, and a lot will depend on the density of your city. So in a small town like this, you don't really need a lot of different fire stations and police stations and hospitals. But as the city starts to grow, the needs will increase more and more. There's two kind of broad things you can do in this game. One is to put down what we call the Tier 1 stations. And those are the small kind of starter stations like this police station here. Then when you get enough money, you can advance up to the what we call Tier 2 systems, which are much bigger and will cover more area, and they have a lot more functionality. So sometimes some players like to put down a whole bunch of small stations around, and other players like to make that centralized big station right in the middle. And I think that's just more of a personal preference for what kind of town that you have. Personally, when I'm putting down more than one, I'll spread them out, because since all the police cars and fire trucks and ambulances have to really drive down the roads to get to where they need to be, having that spread out is going to be more beneficial than having one central thing.
I have another question here. Can the road escalate in a spiral?
Yeah, so the question is, can the road go up in a spiral with the raise lower tool? So we have seen a lot of very creative cities on YouTube where people have done all sorts of things. I'm not sure if we're going to be able to do a quick demo here, but maybe if we go to the arc tool, we can try to build it up. It can be kind of difficult, but the short answer is yes, you can do it. The longer answer is you may have to spend some time and effort trying to get just the right road layout to work, because it can be kind of finicky. As you can see, it's all red here. That means it's not liking what we're doing. But there are patterns that you can get at where you can start moving it up higher and higher. And we've seen some beautiful cities that look almost like Hot Wheels tracks or roller coaster rides, where they have these gigantic spirals going around the entire city.
Okay. How can they protect their city from zombies and meteors?
Okay, so protecting your city from any type of disasters, you can't really do that too easily. Some of the things are more triggered by what you do. So in the case of zombies, that's actually caused by a problem with your healthcare system. So there's certain events that will trigger, like too many people being sick all at the same time, that will then cause a zombie outbreak. It's not 100%. There's a random chance that it may happen. So that is one of the disasters that you can more or less control. If you keep everybody healthy, you won't get zombies. Meteors, on the other hand, there's nothing you can do about that. So when a meteor comes in, it's just going to come in, and you just hope that it doesn't hit your Empire State Building, for instance. I will say that in the expansion pack for the Cities of Tomorrow that's coming out next month, we do include the option to turn off disasters now. So when you play the game, if you don't want disasters, you can just click a checkbox, and the disasters won't even happen at all. The other thing you can do is if you're playing in what we call sandbox mode, then disasters won't happen in sandbox mode unless you trigger them by yourself. So that's another way of preventing them from happening.
Great. Can you raise a road that has already been placed?
You cannot raise a road that's already placed. No, you can draw over top of it and build another road, or you can bulldoze that road and then try to draw it again, but there's no way to lift up a road that's already on the ground.
What do you think is the best way to place your industrial areas and waste areas?
Well, the first thing to do is look at which way the wind is blowing. And there's a little wind map over here, and you see these blue arrows. So in this case for industry, for sure, you want to make sure that they're at the edge of the city border, that's at the side where the wind is going to take it out away from you. Because this is a regional type game, a lot of that pollution that gets blown out might get blown into your neighbors if there's somebody further downwind. But you could pretend that's their problem, not yours. But if you want to try to keep your own city clean, look at the wind map and figure that out. Also, when you're zoning industry, you'll see a little wind gauge. So if I go to the industry palette here, you'll notice that there's a little marker. So as I'm laying down all this yellow here, I know that their smokestacks, their pollution will be blowing over top of other industry. Industry doesn't care about pollution. They're happy just to sit in a bunch of pollution and they just keep working just fine. So blowing smoke and pollution on top of other factories isn't really a problem. It's when you're blowing it on houses that's going to be the worst. For all of the other systems with like dumping your sewage and where you put your garbage, I still kind of follow a similar rule where I like to put it out at the edges because that's just going to be far away from everybody and cause the least amount of problems. But I really recommend, as quick as possible, getting rid of your sewage outflow pipes and trying to replace them with the sewage treatment plants. And that will help a lot of that, at least that sewage problem from happening. Here you can see the city's kind of young, but you can already see the ground around that sewage outflow pipe is starting to get really brown, and it'll just get worse and worse over time. But it is at the edge of the city because that's like the best place to hide those nasty things. One last solution you can do is you can build another city or have your friend build another city, and they can take all of your sewage and garbage from you, and then you can have a nice clean city, but they're going to pay the cost, not you.
Great. Is it better to connect public transportation stops from low density to high density zones?
Well, in general, it's best to keep all of your high-density zones have public transport options. So you can connect them back and forth between the different density classes, but what's more important than density is the type of zone. So whether it's a workplace or whether it's a house, that's what you want to connect together because you want your people to be able to get to and from work really easily, independent of what the density might be. But as you start to get up into density 2s, you're going to start to have traffic problems. And when you get into density 3s, you will have traffic problems guaranteed unless you've been working very carefully to make sure that you have a lot of public transportation options.
Okay. Can you add more roads between cities?
No, you cannot. So the roads built out into the region they're kind of like owned by Maxis. So think of that like as the interstate highway system, and that's something that the cities can't change. All you can really do is make sure that you're taking advantage of the train tracks and the ferry docks. And there's some new cities coming, new regions coming that will have more than one entryway, like this one that you're looking at. So some of the first cities that we had only had one way in, and some of our newer cities that we're building have a couple different ways in.
Great. Are you able to upgrade regular avenues or roads into streetcar avenues?
Yes, well, avenues can always be upgraded into any type of avenue, and streets can be upgraded to any type of street, but you can't convert the streets into avenues. So when you're planning out your city at the beginning, if you build everything which is streets, you'll never be able to upgrade it into a streetcar. It's only if you have avenues. And to build an avenue where there once was a street, you're going to have to bulldoze. Now, what would happen, it's kind of similar in real life where if you have a narrow road and you've already built buildings on both sides of a narrow road, and then you decide you wanted a really wide road, you're going to have to tear down the buildings to make that happen. But remember, you can also just put down the light rail track separately. So it's okay to run a light rail track along a street without actually converting that street over to a light rail street or light rail avenue.
Okay. And I'm not going to be able to get to everyone's question because several people are asking. This is the new version of SimCity. This is not SimCity 4 Deluxe.
Yeah. So we also call this one SimCity 2013.
Okay. How long does it usually take to grow a city?
That really depends on the type of player. So as a very general answer to that, the longer you've played the game and the more experienced you are, the faster you can do it. When you're very first starting out, it can take 10 hours or so to build up a city, maybe even more, because you're still experimenting, you're still trying to even understand all the systems. But some of the people in the office, for instance, Chris, who built this city, I think he maybe spent 20 minutes building this whole city up. It's not a high-density city yet, but his method of building all the roads and getting it all set up first, he does that really quick, and then he slowly starts to grow different parts of his city using the different road types to pick and choose where he wants different things to be. So you can do it really fast just to lay everything out, but it's still going to take some time to get everything to grow up to skyscrapers. Oh, also, I was going to say there's a little trick about if you want to really speed things up, in addition to the speed controls where you can just make time go faster. If you lower taxes, you can make things grow a lot faster, because remember I mentioned that with the density, that's controlled by how happy the people are, and people are really happy when you lower the taxes. So if we turn down taxes a lot, like even down to 0, then that will make those type of buildings grow much faster. Of course, in this example, you can see we're going to go bankrupt if we try to do that. But the theory is if maybe we could tax the rich more, not tax the poor, that will make more poor people move into our city. Or we can do the opposite, where we could really tax the poor and not tax the rich, and that will make more rich people move into our city. So that's another way of accelerating things.
Does smog occur from too many cars?
From chimneys and cars? So, yeah. So not from cars, no. The cars don't actually contribute to pollution. That's something we really wanted in the game, but the way the engine works, we weren't able to get that system built in. So most of the pollution is just going to come from industry, from the air pollution. It'll also come from like garbage dumps and sewage plants and other things like that. There's one case where with the houses, they'll start making pollution if you don't tie them to a sewage system. They'll dump their sewage in their backyard, which will then start to cause ground pollution around those houses. And if no one picks up their garbage will eventually start to create pollution. So houses can make pollution, but in general they don't. Their chimneys don't make pollution. It's only the industrial that makes the air pollution.
Okay. What are the effects of rubble in abandoned buildings?
Okay, so rubble, well, so there's different states a building will go through, and we do this kind of on purpose by design to help the player understand what's happening in the city. So the first level that you want to look at is just whether people are happy or not. So we can go to the happiness view, and we can just kind of look and see where people are happy. This little view here will show you. So the red buildings, there's something wrong with them. So this is kind of your first level of response as the mayor. You can just kind of look at it and say, where are the problems, and you point at it and it will tell you why. So different people will have different reasons for leaving. Overall, the city's doing pretty good. There's just a couple people who aren't too happy. So we could decide to fix their problem now before it becomes worse, or we could just decide to let them have their problem. The next thing that'll happen is they'll move out of their building and it will go vacant. And once it goes vacant, there's a chance that somebody might move back in if you fix the problems that caused the vacancy to begin with, or the abandonment to begin with. So usually what I do is when a building goes abandoned, like these ones over here, I don't bulldoze them right away. I see if I can fix the problem that caused them to go abandoned, and then maybe people will move back in. It turns out if it's just a small building like these ones, it doesn't really matter, because if I bulldoze them, a small building will just come back in and take its place. Where it's really important, though, is when you have skyscrapers and really big buildings and factories that you've spent a lot of time and energy investing to make these things big, and you don't just want to bulldoze those just because they're abandoned, because it may take a while to get something to replace it. Instead, it's more efficient to try to solve the problems, and hopefully people will move back into it again and get it going without having to build all the way up from the ground up again. With rubble, it's already too late, so you just need to bulldoze rubble. We had talked about making like auto bulldozing of rubble, but one thing that we like about having the player do it is it gives the player a chance to see what happened, that there was a problem, and it will tell you the best that it can why the rubble occurred, and that gives the player a chance to try to fix those problems. But still, if a big disaster comes through your city, or, a big fire or something like that, you're going to end up with a lot of rubble. And what I recommend with the bulldoze tool, if you go to bulldozing and there is rubble, there'll be a little, well, we just cleaned up all the rubble, but there'll be a little icon that lets you kind of jump really quickly between the different buildings that are rubbled to do it faster. So if we see some more rubble before this demo is over, then we'll try to show that.
Stone, can you tell us the difference between a shuttle bus depot and a bus terminal?
Yeah, so the shuttle bus is the small local bus that it'll never leave your city. It just moves all around, taking people that live in the city to the different stops. And then the bus depot, or the bus terminal, has those regional buses. So now the difference, so those are the difference between the two big buildings. Those are the ones that actually hold all of the buses. So if we go to our shuttle bus depot, where is our shuttle bus depot? So if we can zoom in on that. And the shuttle bus depot is just where the buses go, and the buses live here. You can add more garages to it to get more buses, and the stops are where the buses actually stop at to pick up passengers. So think of one as like it's the garage. It's where the workmen report in the morning. It's where all the maintenance of the buses would be done, and then the stops are just places that people can get on and off the buses. So they kind of have a different functionality.
Great. What type of specialization do you think brings in the most revenue?
Oh, they're all pretty good about bringing in revenue. It's more of the consequences of that revenue. Sometimes it can be deceptive that you think you're making a lot of money, but you're really spending a lot of money to support those systems. So, for instance, the ore mining and the drilling will make you a lot of money, huge amounts of money, but they're also going to be causing a lot of environmental damage, which is going to cost you money. So you might have to put down extra hospitals, extra ways of like trying to clean up the mess. The other problem with those is that they'll run out. So if you can look at the, I don't know if the city has oil or some of the other resources in it. Yes, this one has oil. You can start pumping that up, and there's a lot of money just sitting under the Perez residence there. So we could decide, let's bulldoze these different houses and let's get at this oil. but that's also costing us something because we're losing workers and we're losing shoppers when we start bulldozing those houses. My personal favorite is the casinos, because the casinos, since they're not really using a resource, they don't pollute in that same way. They make a lot of garbage, but they don't really pollute the ground and the air. And you kind of have an infinite supply of the resource, which is tourism. It doesn't ever run out. It just keeps coming over and over. Now this one also, though, it does have a cost, a hidden cost associated with it, which is that makes a lot of crime. So if we look at our crime maps, what you'll start to see, we just put down this casino so you don't see it yet because it's not open, but you'll start to see more and more crime start to spread out from those casinos. So yeah, we're making a lot of money from our casino, but we're spending a lot of money on buses and trains and cruise ships and airports to get all the tourists in, and we're also spending a lot of money on our police system to make sure that we're capturing all the criminals that the casinos attract. So those are all just factors that work into it. Overall, they can all kind of make the same amount of money. They're tuned in such a way that they're about equal. Some just have worse problems than others, and some will eventually die out, like the oil and the coal.
Great. Can you explain trade depots?
Yeah, so the trade depots, this is if you're going down that manufacturing route, you'll want to get into a trade system. So anybody, whatever kind of city they're in, they can put down a trade depot. And even if you don't have any heavy industry, if you just have like the normal industrial zoning, the industry will ship their goods to these things and make more money. So sometimes you might get a message that the industry says not enough places to ship our freight. Normally they'll ship it to the stores in your city, but if you have really heavy industry, there's not going to be enough stores that everybody can't ship at the same time. So you put this thing down, and now you start to see some trucks. The industry's starting already to send some trucks out here, and you'll see the freight start to pile up in this trade lot here. As we start to get into different types of cities, like for instance, let's say we wanted to mine coal, we could go into this and edit it and add different types of storage. So we could add a coal storage lot, which would let us then sell our coal on the global market for money if we didn't want to burn it ourselves. So they're very flexible. In most cities, an average city doesn't need one, but if you start to specialize either with a lot of industry or coal, oil, any type of manufacturing, then they're required. Like you're not going to be able to get very far unless you have several of these in your city.
Are you able to replace resources if you use them all up?
No, you'll have to start buying them. So if you run out of coal, and this is kind of modeled somewhat off real-world lessons, so no resource is infinite. Eventually you're going to run out. And at that point, if I'm a city, let's say, that has a coal power plant, and I'm running out of coal or I'm not mining up my own coal, I'm going to have to start buying coal from what we call the global market. And then I'm just going to have to spend money to get those resources into my city at that point. We spent a lot of time talking about these different systems, and because we wanted the game to kind of feel that it would teach lessons about the real world, that's why we didn't just make these things infinite, that we wanted people to understand that some cities rise and fall based on the resources that are underneath of them. And there's a lot of historical examples of like the gold rush where towns form because there's gold, but as soon as the gold runs out, everybody abandons the town. And there's similar stories with almost any resource like oil, diamonds, anything that can happen.
Great. Here's another transportation question. Can you put a railroad on a bridge?
You can raise the railroads. So it will be a bridge in that case. So we do a little example here. This just is the same way that you can do it with the roads. And this is actually a good trick to get the train to where you need to go. So like if we're trying to get the train right to the industry to drop off some cargo, and we don't want it to run right through the middle of our neighborhoods, we can lift it up over top of the neighborhoods. Sometimes you have to do a little bit of bulldozing to make it work. But again, it depends on how good good you are at that initial planning. Let's draw a big railroad track here. All right, you can go ahead and ask another question. We'll fiddle around with this.
Okay, I'm typing an answer to another one, so
Okay.
let me pull through here and see what I got.
All right, that's an expensive train
What
track.
you mentioned the global market. Can you explain that?
Yeah, so the global market is this. It's a way to buy and sell the goods in your city. So you're not ever really buying directly from another player or selling to another player. You're selling to the market, and then other people are buying from the market. So it's kind of up to you as a player to decide if I want to harvest my own stuff and sell it for money, if I want to harvest my own stuff and just burn it or use it within my city, or if I don't even want to harvest at all, if I just want to buy the resources. And how it works when you put down a trade lot, you can click on it. Let's finish this. This is a freight trade lot here. But if you click on a trade port, there's a button for managing the global market deliveries. And right now we don't have any type of trade lot. But let's say we wanted to start buying oil. So we put down our oil. We go to Manage Global Market Deliveries. And here we can import and export different goods into our city. So we have a choice. We can either just use our oil locally, which means like if we have oil smelting that makes, our oil refining that makes fuel, we would set it on use local. If we want to bring it into the city, we import, and then if we want to sell it, we hit export. The prices of the global market change based on what players are doing on the servers. So if every single person all starts selling oil, the price will drop. And if every single person starts buying oil, the price will increase. So they're dynamic in that sense. You don't always have control about how much these things cost. It's just what other players are doing.
Great, Stone. We're running out of time here, so I think we're going to wrap this up. I want to thank you so much. This has been very informative on the game and the possibilities, and the students, I'm hoping, see the city and the possibility of building their cities. So I'd like to thank you for joining us. Again,
Okay, you're welcome. It was great. Let me also just add as a final thing, the community that makes cities is really big and it's growing every day. And a lot of players post up YouTube videos. And there's a very large number. If you do a search on YouTube for SimCity design tips, things like that, you can find all sorts of helpful guides and walkthroughs and crazy experiments that people do, like those big circle, spiral bridge cities.
Great. Thank you again so much. And once again, the webinar will be posted by the end of the week to the Future City website, www.futurecity.org. It will be on the resource page. Again, thanks everybody for joining us, and have a good rest of the afternoon.
All right, thank you. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.